Hello everyone, welcome back. You're watching Empyrion Galactic Survival episode 165. I'm Enigmaeus and today we're looking at the Copperhead. It's done, the blueprint is available. The link for the blueprint will be in the information box below the video. Today we're just going to do a general overview of the ship and some of its key features. We've been doing a pretty detailed review of the various different things that went into the ship and how we did them as we went through the build process. So today is just sort of the condensed version, talking about the more important aspects of the ship instead of every single detail. One of the key things about this ship is it's big and heavy, and very important to point that out from the very beginning. It handles much better than it did in the last episode. If you saw the last episode, acceleration was not great, top speed was not great, maneuvering, being able to turn left and right was not especially good. A lot of that is improved. Actually, all of it is improved. Still not the fastest ship, still doesn't turn the fastest, but that's what we get for having a big, bulky, heavy hover vessel, is the performance characteristics kind of suffer. If you want to mess around adding more RCS units, more thrusters, there's lots of room to do that. Just putting that out there from the very beginning so you know what you're getting yourself into. This whole ship, actually, the idea to build this ship came from a desire to mess around with this pattern with the wall blocks and slopes that we used pretty much anywhere we could find a flat surface on the ship as we were building it. It's something that I call hull weave just because it reminds me of something like carbon fiber, where it's actually a woven material. And what I found interesting about it is that as you move around and look at the ship from different angles, it shifts. The appearance of the pattern shifts just because we're exposing different edges and they're contrasting colors, and the end result is something that's a little bit more dynamic than the standard hull design. So that was sort of what really got me started on building this ship, and everything else basically came after. The ship has an almost full complement of weapons. The only thing that's missing is 2 of the 6 Gatling guns that were allowed. We've got 4 on the ship. We're allowed up to 6, and obviously that means we're missing 2. The ones that we do have are down here along the ground, and that's because I actually like using them for clearing trees. If you get stuck in a forest, Gatling guns are a pretty effective way of getting rid of trees, or at least they were the last time I tried using them for that purpose. Who knows, maybe it's changed. They can be used for attacking critters on the ground as well, but it's not necessarily the easiest thing to do to aim because they're so far away from the center. Kind of tricky. Clearing trees, hopefully they're still fun and efficient for doing that, but that's also why I didn't really knock myself out trying to figure out a spot to add the remaining 2, is it just didn't seem like something that was necessary. We've got a full complement of plasma turrets there on the front here. We've got an artillery turret, my go-to choice for clearing turrets off of points of interest. And we've got the missile turrets on either side, 2 of them. The last set of guns that we have is 6 minigun turrets mounted on the underside, largely as anti-personnel. If you've got critters running around, hostile critters kind of wanting to harass you on the ground when you're working near the ship, these will help take care of that. If you're in a PvP scenario and you've got people who want to try and get in to the underside of the ship so that they can get into the entrance as easily as possible, they're going to have a bit of a problem with these as well. Thrusters, we've added a few since the last episode. We added this strip here, we added the 3 on the bottom here, we added the 4 on either side here, and a whole bunch here. We had some here before, but it wasn't as densely organized as they are now. The end result is it accelerates much faster. The top speed is quite a bit faster, and in general it's a lot more fun to actually pilot because you do get a little bit of response when you try and move forward. It's always a nice thing to have. Also added a bunch more RCS units so that the turning speed is a little bit better, but again, big bulky ship, it's not going to be a race car, but it is going to get where it needs to go. This is the main entrance. You've got a ramp. You can withdraw the ramp if you're running around with your jetpack. It's easy enough to jump up onto the ramp. If you're in a planet scenario where the gravity is a little bit more aggressive and you're having a hard time it might be better to park the ship over a berm of some sort, or a bump in the terrain, or a raised section on your base, so that you've got a little bit of a boost getting up into the ship. But other than that, it's not too bad. When first entering the ship through the door, it's open now, but obviously it would be closed in most cases. The first chamber that you enter is pressurized, and this is again one of those scenarios, trying to think in terms of what could be a worst case scenario when you're entering the ship, and one of those might be that you're out of oxygen in your suit, you're in an atmosphere that doesn't have any oxygen. Being able to jump in here, take your helmet off, and survive is not necessarily a bad thing. And also we've got a pair of oxygen stations, one to either side as you're entering, deliberately painted a color that stands out so that you can top up your suit quickly and easily as well. You can see we've got the ventilator right here doing its thing. Moving on from here, the only other pressurized section in the ship is the forward cockpit. And the reason for that is just it's small and it's easy to keep pressurized without using a bunch of oxygen. Realistically speaking, if your ship is going to take damage, and that damage is going to involve taking hits to the front, it's going to go through the glass and you're going to lose the pressurization anyways. It's just one of those things. This whole forward cockpit is mostly for aesthetics. You can jump into the thing here and you've got the glass and the light shining through. I like the look of it. I can't say necessarily that it's a common feature of my builds to have glass cockpits, just because it does make them kind of flimsy. But that's why we built the wall in behind, is so that if someone's shooting through the glass, they're going to have a little bit of a tougher time getting through to the interior of the ship and making a mess of things there. Just something to keep in mind. Anywhere else in the ship that you go is not pressurized. If you want to add ventilators, there's nothing to say that you can't, but it's a fairly large interior sort of area as hover vessels go. And again, it was more conserving oxygen and not really needing it to be pressurized in this whole large area. What you do once you've put it in your world is entirely up to you. We've got basic machines. Whatever you see on this side of the ship is exactly the same on the other side of the ship. All the same machines, all the same storage, everything is exactly the same. So we've got a constructor, 2 fridges, another oxygen station, and an armor locker. Not a bad thing to have. We've got oxygen tanks along there. You don't need to access them directly anymore, but that was kind of a convenient place to put them. We've got general storage, and it's surrounded by hardened steel to make it a little bit more difficult to be destroyed if you've got a hull breach somewhere. We've got ammunition storage in its own room. You can see there's quite a bit of ammunition storage available. And again, like I say, this is also available on the other side of the ship. So if something goes wrong here and you have cascading explosions somehow causing things to be destroyed, you're not necessarily going to lose everything, because if you've divided your ammunition stores between the 2 rooms, you're going to have at least some redundancy and a little bit of extra protection that way. Over here, we have fuel storage. Same thing, pretty generous amount of fuel storage, also available on the far side over there. And lastly, we have the generators. Even with all of the thrusters that you see on the back end of the ship, plus all of the other maneuvering thrusters, the hover engines, the boosters, the highest I've seen the energy consumption go is in and around 20%. You can afford to lose an entire generator room and still be able to get around and do what you need to do without necessarily noticing that something is missing. Not necessarily advisable to allow this to be destroyed, because there's actually quite a lot of hardened steel between this room and the outside of the ship, but it's just something to keep in mind. And then I think the last interior detail is this cockpit back here. This is the cockpit that I would use when I was maneuvering the ship around, just doing testing and things of that nature. This is the safer of the 2 cockpits. I realize I always think in terms of people shooting through the hull to get to the core, or shooting through the hull to get to the ammunition stores or whatever, and never really think in terms of shooting through the hull to kill you in your seat. But that's a not bad strategy if you're trying to mess someone up. So this is the safer alternative, and obviously it works just as well as the forward one when you're using this particular view, which on a ship this size is kind of the view that you want to use. So you can see when we get all of the thrusters firing, much faster acceleration than the last time we looked at it. Top speed is quite a bit better. The RCS units that I added since the last episode make turning faster. It's still, like I say, it's not a race car, but at least it's maneuverable enough that you can get around and do the things that you need to do. If you're flying around for the purpose of getting into some points of interest, going after some loot, doing some things like that, it could be doing a lot worse than a ship like this. This is a ship that's basically about surviving, and the reason it's about surviving is because we made it really, really big so that we could do all that hull weave stuff. And now surviving is really where it stands out the most in terms of things that it does really, really well. So that's the ship. That's the hover vessel. As you can see, it can get around. It's got lots of fuel capacity. We've got going forward at maximum speed, we've got 200 minutes worth of fuel, and it wasn't absolutely full when we started, so we're in pretty good shape that way. So next up, what are we doing next? I think we're going to build some small vessels. We're going to mess around with something in the small vessel category that I don't normally do, and that's small, pretty much disposable ships. I just want to mess around with it. We might do 2 or 3 little ships, and then we'll throw out the blueprint and people can mess around with them and modify them and do whatever they want. Because we've got this ship here that's more about static survival than anything else, I kind of want to go the other side of things and go for ships that are small, really, really high performance, even if they do kind of crumble if they get hit a couple of times. So if you want to be notified about the next and future episodes in this series, the easiest way to do that is to subscribe to my channel or follow me on social media. The links for social media are always in the information section below the video. Feel free to leave your comments and feedback. Thanks for watching, guys, and take care.